Bride sent to the wrong ranch. Then a child whispered something that changed everything. The stagecoach wheels had been grinding against her heart for 300 miles. Lily May pressed the wrinkled letter against her chest as red dust swirled through the window like whispered warnings. She had read those careful words so many times the ink had begun to fade, but the promise still burned clear: a good man seeks a gentle wife to tend his ranch and love his child. The driver's voice cut through her prayers. Whispering Pines Ranch, Miss. Lily May's hands trembled as she smoothed her only good dress. The blue cotton had wilted in the heat, clinging to her thin frame like a second skin of sweat and fear. Through the dust-caked window, she saw a man walking toward the coach. Tall. Broad shoulders. Hat pulled low against the setting sun that painted everything the color of dried blood. This was supposed to be her salvation. Her escape from a father who drank away their farm and used his fists to silence her mother's tears. The mail-order bride advertisement had been her last hope, crumpled in her pocket for weeks before she found the courage to write back. The stagecoach lurched to a stop. Dust settled like a shroud around them. "You Thomas Brennan?" the driver called out. "That's right." The man's voice carried the weight of granite mountains. Deep. Steady. But something hollow echoed beneath it, like wind through empty caves. Lily May's heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped down from the coach. Her boots hit the hard-packed earth, and she nearly stumbled. The man reached out to steady her, his calloused hand gentle against her elbow. When she looked up, she saw eyes the color of winter storms. Beautiful and dangerous and full of old pain. "You're..." He stopped. Swallowed hard. "You're not what I expected." Heat crawled up her neck. She had never been called pretty. Her hair was the color of field mice, her frame too thin, her hands too rough from years of washing other people's laundry. But the way he looked at her now made something flutter in her chest like a caged bird. "I'm Lily May Patterson." The words came out as a whisper. "I got your letter." Something shifted in his expression. A shadow passed over those storm-gray eyes, quick as a cloud across the sun. "My letter?" Behind him, the ranch house stood like a fortress against the dying light. It was bigger than she had imagined, built from rough-hewn logs that had weathered decades of prairie storms. Smoke curled from the chimney, and warm yellow light spilled from the windows. It looked like home. It looked like everything she had dreamed about during those long, terrifying nights when her father's rage shook the walls of their rotting cabin. "Mama always said God provides," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Thomas Brennan stared at her for a long moment. The evening wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. It lifted the ends of her hair, and she saw his jaw tighten. "How long since you lost her?" he asked quietly. 3 years. The words tasted like dust and old tears. She just faded away. Like she was tired of fighting. He nodded. Understanding passed between them, quick and silent as a shared prayer. She could see it in the way his shoulders carried their burden, in the careful way he spoke about loss. This was a man who knew what it meant to watch someone you love slip away like water through desperate fingers. "Come on then." He picked up her battered carpetbag without asking. "Emma will want to meet you." "Emma?" "My daughter. She's..." He paused, and pain flickered across his face like lightning in a summer storm. "She's had a hard time since her mama passed. Hasn't spoken much. The doc says some children go quiet when grief gets too heavy to carry." They walked toward the house in comfortable quiet, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. Crickets began their evening song, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the rising stars. The sound was lonely and wild and beautiful, like everything else about this harsh, honest land. Before she could answer, the door swung open. A small girl stood in the doorway, her dark hair braided down her back. She had her father's eyes, but where his were full of winter storms, hers held the deep stillness of a mountain lake. She looked at Lily May with the kind of ancient wisdom that only comes from surviving too much sorrow too young. The child opened her mouth. Closed it. Then, in a voice like rustling leaves, she whispered, "Mama said you'd come. She said you'd have yellow hair and sad eyes, and you'd help Papa remember how to smile." Thomas Brennan went white as sun-bleached bone. The carpetbag slipped from his fingers and hit the porch with a soft thud that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. And Lily May realized with cold, creeping certainty that she was standing on the wrong porch, at the wrong ranch, holding the wrong man's letter. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope ready to snap. Thomas stared at his daughter as if she had spoken in tongues, while Lily May felt the earth shift beneath her feet like quicksand. The child's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, impossible to take back. "Emma." Thomas's voice came out rough as sandpaper. "What did you say about Mama?" But the little girl had already retreated into herself, stepping back into the shadows of the doorway. Her dark eyes flickered between her father and Lily May, wide with the kind of fear that comes from saying too much too soon. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear moments before. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something wild and dangerous that made her pulse quicken. "Just for tonight," she whispered when Thomas insisted she stay. The evening meal passed in careful silence. Emma sat between them at the rough wooden table, picking at her beans and cornbread while casting furtive glances at Lily May. Thomas barely touched his food, his storm-gray eyes distant as prairie lightning. After Emma was tucked into bed, Thomas and Lily May sat on the front porch, the space between them heavy with unspoken questions. "Tell me about the letter," Thomas said finally. Lily May pulled the wrinkled paper from her pocket with trembling fingers. When he read by moonlight, his jaw tightened with each word. "This isn't my handwriting." His voice was quiet as a prayer. "It's my brother's." "Your brother?" "Caleb. He owns the Circle C Ranch, about 15 miles south of here." Thomas leaned back against the porch post, and something broken flickered across his face. "He's been trying to find a wife for near on 2 years now. Has terrible luck with women. They take one look at his temper and run for the hills." Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the rolling prairie in stark white. The storm was still miles away, but Lily May could feel it in her bones like an old ache. "So I'm his bride, not yours." The words tasted bitter as burnt coffee. "Seems so." Coyotes howled from the hills, their voices weaving together in an ancient song of loneliness and longing. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain, and somewhere an owl called out its haunting question to the darkness. The truth came out like water through a broken dam. She told him about her father's drinking, about the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, about the night she woke to find him standing over her bed with something dark and terrible in his eyes. She spoke of her mother's death, of the loneliness that ate at her like prairie fire, of the desperate hope that somewhere in this vast land there might be a place where she could belong. "You're not something to be used, Lily May. You're—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "You're worth more than that." Thomas reached out and covered her hand with his. The touch was gentle as evening rain, and she felt something inside her chest crack open like ice in spring thaw. The wind shifted, bringing with it the first cool drops of rain. They should have gone inside, but neither moved. The storm was coming fast now, lightning dancing across the sky in silver ribbons, and the air crackled with electricity that had nothing to do with weather. Thunder crashed overhead, and the skies opened. Rain fell in silver sheets, drumming against the roof and turning the dust to mud. They ran for the door, laughing despite everything, and when they stumbled into the parlor, dripping and breathless, Thomas caught her against his chest to steady her. For one heartbeat, they stood frozen. His hands on her waist. Her palms pressed against his shirt, feeling the wild hammering of his heart beneath her fingers. His eyes were dark as storm clouds, and she saw in them the same desperate longing that was tearing her apart. Then they heard the soft creak of floorboards above, and they sprang apart like guilty children. Emma was awake, and Lily May caught the pale flutter of a nightgown at the top of the stairs before the child melted back into the shadows. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, as if the sky itself was weeping for the impossible situation they found themselves in. Dawn came pale and wounded through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the rough wooden floor. Lily May stood at the stove, her hands shaking as she tried to crack eggs into the iron skillet. She had barely slept, her mind spinning like a dust devil with memories of Thomas's touch, the way his eyes had darkened when he looked at her in the rain. Emma appeared in the doorway like a ghost, her dark hair hanging loose around her pale face. She wore a faded blue dress that was too small for her growing frame, and her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. The child moved to her father's side, but her strange, ancient eyes never left Lily May's face. They ate breakfast in silence that felt thick as honey. Thomas pushed his eggs around his plate, stealing glances at Lily May when he thought she wasn't looking. Emma picked at her biscuit, tearing it into tiny pieces that she scattered like snow across her plate. "I'll hitch the wagon after breakfast," Thomas finally said. "Take you to Caleb's place." The words hit Lily May like bullets, but she only nodded. "That would be best." "Best for who?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. Thomas nearly dropped his coffee cup. "Emma? Sweetheart, what did you say?" The little girl looked at her father with those deep, knowing eyes. Then she turned to Lily May, and something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. "Mama told me things before she died." Emma's voice was getting stronger, each word falling like drops of rain after a long drought. "She made me promise not to tell. But she's been visiting my dreams, Papa. She says it's time." The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Outside, a meadowlark called its liquid song to the morning sky, but inside, the silence was so complete Lily May could hear her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. "What kind of things, baby girl?" Emma looked down at her scattered biscuit crumbs. When she spoke again, her voice was so quiet they had to lean forward to hear her. She knew about Uncle Caleb's letters. The ones he sent to ladies in Denver and Kansas City. "She saw him writing them at our kitchen table when you were out checking the cattle." Thomas's face had gone white as fresh snow. "Emma, what are you saying?" "Mama helped him write those letters. Made them sound pretty and gentle instead of angry." Tears began to slide down the child's cheeks like silver streams. "She said ladies needed to hear soft words, not hard ones. That they needed to feel safe." Lily May felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The letter in her pocket, the careful, gentle words that had drawn her west like a moth to flame, hadn't been written by Thomas at all. They had been written by his wife. By the woman whose memory stood between them like a wall of thorns. "She wrote my letter." The words fell from Lily May's lips like stones into still water. Emma nodded, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face. "Mama said she was helping Uncle Caleb find someone to love him. But when she got sick, really sick, she told me something else." The child's voice broke, and she wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "She said she was sending you to us instead." "What?" Thomas's voice came out as a ragged whisper. "She changed the address on the last letter before she died. Changed it from Uncle Caleb's ranch to ours." Emma looked up at her father with eyes that held too much sorrow for such a young face. "She said Papa needed someone to help him remember how to live. That I needed a mama who would understand what it means to hurt." Thomas walked to the window, his shoulders rigid with shock and something that might have been betrayal. "Why?" His voice was barely audible. "Why would she do that?" Emma slipped from her chair and padded over to him on silent feet. She tugged on his shirt until he looked down at her, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of prophecy. "Because she loved you more than her own jealousy. She knew Uncle Caleb would hurt Miss Lily May with his anger. She knew you would be gentle with her, the way you were gentle with Mama even when she was dying. Emma's voice grew stronger, more certain. Mama said love isn't about keeping people. It's about helping them find where they belong. Thomas sank to his knees so he was level with his daughter. His hands shook as he reached out to cup her small face. She told you all this before she died. The night she died. When you fell asleep in the chair next to the bed, she woke me up. She was so pale, Papa, like moonlight. She whispered everything to me and made me promise to wait until the right lady came. She said I would know her because she would have yellow hair and sad eyes, and when she smiled at me, it would feel like sunshine after winter. Before anyone could respond, the sound of thundering hooves filled the morning air. Through the kitchen window, they could see a cloud of dust approaching fast from the south. As it drew closer, Lily May could make out 3 riders, and her blood turned to ice water in her veins. Emma pressed closer to her father, her small body trembling like a leaf in a gale. "Uncle Caleb's coming," she whispered. "And he's bringing the sheriff." The riders came hard and fast, dust billowing behind them like the smoke of hell itself. Thomas stepped onto the porch, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt .45 at his hip. Lily May followed, Emma clinging to her skirts like a frightened sparrow. The morning sun caught the star pinned to the lead rider's vest, and the metal gleamed like a blade. Sheriff Morrison. Behind him rode Caleb Brennan, sitting his horse like a man riding to war, his dark eyes fixed on Lily May with the intensity of a hawk circling prey. The third rider was Buck Morrison, the sheriff's deputy, his hand resting easy on his gun butt. They reined in their horses 10 feet from the porch, close enough that Lily May could smell the sweat and leather and something else, the bitter scent of men who had ridden hard on the trail of perceived injustice. "Morning, Thomas." Sheriff Morrison's voice carried no friendship, only duty. "We need to talk." Caleb dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling like silver bells as his boots hit the hard-packed earth. He was taller than Thomas, broader through the chest, with rugged handsomeness that turned women's heads in church. But there was something cruel around his eyes. "You know damn well what brings us out." Caleb's voice was rough as broken glass. "You've got something that belongs to me." Emma's small hand found Lily May's, squeezing tight. "I don't have anything of yours, Caleb." "The hell you don't." Caleb's eyes flicked to Lily May, and she saw hunger there. Not the gentle longing she had seen in Thomas's gaze, but something darker. "That's my bride you've got standing there. Mine by law and by God." Sheriff Morrison shifted in his saddle, leather creaking like old bones. "Miss Patterson, I understand you contracted to marry Caleb Brennan of the Circle C Ranch. That makes you legally his intended, which means Thomas here is harboring another man's property." The word property hit Lily May like a slap across the face. "I'm not anyone's property," she said, and her voice carried a strength that surprised them all. "And I never contracted to marry anyone. I answered a letter, that's all." Caleb laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A letter that promised you to me, darling. Makes no difference what ranch you ended up at. A contract is a contract." Thomas stepped forward, putting himself between Lily May and his brother. "There's no contract, Caleb. Just a letter. And the lady has the right to change her mind. Since when do you care about ladies' rights, brother? Seems to me you've been mighty quick to take what's mine." The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. "I haven't taken anything." Thomas's voice was deadly quiet. "She came here by mistake. I offered her shelter for the night, nothing more." "Shelter." Caleb's laugh was ugly as a crow's call. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to steal my woman the same way you stole everything else." Emma made a small sound of distress, and Lily May pulled the child closer. "What are you talking about?" Thomas asked, but there was something in his voice now. Something that sounded like old guilt rising to the surface. You know what I'm talking about. Caleb's eyes were black as coal smoke. Papa's will. The ranch. The cattle. Everything that should have been split between us, you got it all because you were the golden boy who stayed home while I was off fighting in the war. The truth hit the morning air like lightning. Lily May could see it in Thomas's face, the knowledge that his brother's words held weight. That there was old poison between them, festering for years like an untreated wound. The war's been over for 10 years, Thomas said quietly. This isn't about inheritance, and you know it. No. Caleb's smile was sharp as a blade. This is about you taking what's mine. Again. In the distance, thunder rumbled like the voice of God warning of judgment to come. Dark clouds were building on the horizon, and the wind carried the scent of rain and something else, the metallic taste of violence about to be unleashed. Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. Miss Patterson, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. Peacefully. There's been a complaint filed, and until this gets sorted out legal-like, you need to come to town. She's not going anywhere. The words came out of Thomas's mouth like bullets from a gun barrel. And that's when Caleb smiled, really smiled, for the first time since arriving. It was the smile of a man who had finally gotten exactly what he wanted. Well now, brother, he said, his hand dropping to his weapon. Sounds like you just made this official. The world went silent except for the whisper of leather against metal as both brothers drew their guns. Time stretched like taffy in summer heat, each heartbeat lasting an eternity. Lily May pulled Emma behind her, the child's small body trembling against her legs like a bird caught in a snare. Don't do this, Caleb. Thomas's voice was steady, but his Colt .45 never wavered from his brother's chest. Not in front of Emma. Should have thought of that before you decided to steal from me. Caleb's gun was aimed straight at Thomas's heart, his finger white on the trigger. Always the hero, aren't you? Always the one Papa loved best. Sheriff Morrison raised his hand, his own weapon still holstered. Now boys, let's not do anything we can't take back. There's been enough blood spilled in this county. But Lily May could see it in Caleb's eyes, the kind of rage that had been festering for years like poison in an old wound. Emma stepped out from behind Lily May's skirts. The little girl walked between the two guns with the fearless grace of a child who had already seen too much sorrow to be afraid of death. Both men's weapons dropped slightly, neither willing to risk hitting her. Uncle Caleb. Emma's voice was clear as church bells across empty prairie. Mama left something for you too. Caleb's eyes flicked to his niece, confusion replacing some of the rage. What are you talking about, little bird? Before she died, Mama wrote you a letter. She made me hide it until the right time. Emma reached into the pocket of her small dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. She said you needed to read it when your heart was ready to listen. The guns lowered another inch. Thomas kept his weapon trained on his brother, but his storm-gray eyes were fixed on his daughter with something like wonder. She was dying, Emma, Caleb said roughly. People say lots of things when they're dying. Not Mama. Emma's voice carried the absolute certainty of childhood faith. Mama always told the truth, even when it hurt. She held out the letter, and after a moment's hesitation, Caleb holstered his weapon and took it. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper, and Lily May saw his face change as he read. The anger drained away like water through sand, replaced by something that looked like grief. She. His voice broke like a dry stick. She knew. She knew about Mary Ellen. Thomas lowered his gun completely. Who's Mary Ellen? A girl I knew before the war. Before I turned bitter and mean. Caleb's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. Sarah knew I was still carrying a torch for her. Knew I was trying to find a wife because I couldn't have the one I really wanted. The letter trembled in his hands as he read aloud, his voice rough as sandpaper. Caleb, my dear brother. By the time you read this, I'll be with the angels, and you'll be free to stop pretending you want anyone but Mary Ellen Cartwright. She's been waiting for you to come back to Kansas for 10 years, but you're too proud to go. Stop being a fool. Go home and marry the woman you've always loved. Silence fell like snow across the ranch yard. Even the wind held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mary Ellen married a banker 3 years ago, Caleb whispered. No, she didn't. Emma's voice was soft but certain. Mama kept track of people. She said Mary Ellen never married anybody. She's been teaching school in Topeka and waiting for a ghost to come home from the war. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall like tears from heaven. They struck the dust with soft whispers, each drop creating tiny craters in the earth. Caleb turned to Sheriff Morrison. I'm withdrawing my complaint, Sheriff. Miss Patterson is free to choose her own path. Caleb looked at his brother, and some of the old poison seemed to drain out of him like infection from a lanced wound. Thomas, Sarah was right. About a lot of things. Maybe it's time I stopped fighting ghosts and went after what I really want. Thomas holstered his weapon and stepped forward. For a moment, the brothers just looked at each other, two men who had let bitterness grow between them like thorns. Then Thomas extended his hand. Mary Ellen Cartwright always was the prettiest girl in Kansas, he said quietly. Caleb took his brother's hand, and 20 years of resentment began to crack like ice in spring thaw. She wrote to me once, you know. 2 years after the war ended. I was too proud to write back. It's not too late, Emma said, stepping between them. Mama always said it's never too late to choose love over fear. The rain began to fall in earnest now, washing the dust from their faces and turning the hard earth soft. As the lawmen and Caleb prepared to leave, Emma tugged on her uncle's shirt. When he knelt down to her level, she whispered something in his ear that made him smile, really smile, for the first time all morning. What did she tell you? Thomas asked. Caleb swung up into his saddle, his face lighter than it had been in years. She said her mama visits her dreams sometimes. And last night, Sarah told her that Mary Ellen keeps a picture of me in her Bible. He rode away toward the Kansas border, leaving Thomas and Lily Mae and Emma standing in the rain. The storm clouds were beginning to break up, letting shafts of golden sunlight pierce through like promises of better days to come. Emma took Lily Mae's hand and looked up at her with eyes that held all the wisdom of the prairie. Mama said you'd help Papa remember how to be happy. But she also said you needed to learn that you deserve to be loved just for being you. Lily Mae knelt in the mud and pulled the little girl close, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. Your mama was a very smart woman. She still is, Emma said matter-of-factly. She just talks quieter now. Thomas walked over and gathered them both in his arms, and for the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, Lily Mae felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust and the anger and the fear, leaving behind something clean and new and full of possibility. Above them, the storm clouds rolled away toward the horizon, and the prairie stretched out endless and golden under the healing light of the sun. Sometimes love comes disguised as a mistake, delivered by a dying woman's wisdom and a child's innocent faith in the power of second chances.